What happens when several billionaires, the President of the United States, and about 25,000 plus ones all go into a special bunker facility to survive an extinction level event? You get Hulu's original TV series Paradise. Now what happens when life inside of Paradise is anything but that? This is Survival Cinema. I'm your host, the Urban Sentinel. Let's get into it. Right off the top, I will give credit to Hulu or whoever was responsible for the casting. They picked the right actors to play the right roles, and each of the characters created a personality that fits the environment that they're in. You know, you love, you hate, you distrust, you root for all the right people, and then you find out a little bit later that not everyone is exactly as they seem to be on the surface out in public. Now, the main focus of the series isn't the actual disaster event. That is mentioned, that is featured in different parts of the episode, sort of pieced together. The primary focus on the entire series is effectively a murder within the Paradise community, sets sort of the dominoes falling and things become chaotic after that. And the series works it with flashbacks interspersed between different episodes. Sometimes it starts off with a flashback. Other times it goes somewhere in the middle of that episode and you get a brief glimpse into events that happened before or meanwhile in certain parts of the episode, and you start to see characters that are there in different shades of lighting than you see them in their present time in that episode. Now, the three primary characters that really drive the bus for this series, you have the lead protective Secret Service agent, Xavier Collins, played by Sterling K. Brown. You have the President of the United States, Cal Bradford, played by James Marsden. And you have a multi-billionaire, Samantha Sinatra Redmond, played by Julian Nicholson. They are the focal points to which everything kind of revolves and orbits around. And with those three comes a very different dynamic in all forms and shapes within the community. Now, primarily the part that I like that made me want to do this survival cinema is the enclave that they're in, the facility, paradise that they're in, is made to look like the perfect suburbia, any town USA, housing about 25,000 people. All of the, shall we say, guests have a purpose, have a role. They've all been selected, and with that, an accompaniment of other people that are there with them. Some people are performing the job that they actually did prior to the event. Other people are just sort of placeholders and face spillers to keep things going. But everything, when you see it, looks completely normal. It looks like a normal housing development in any type of suburb someplace. You know, manicured lawns, walkways, you know, there's an ice cream shop, there's, you know, a little small diner and cafe, things like that. You don't really notice anything different about it at all. And it's designed to sort of bring a level of normalcy into the situation. Now, where you juxtapose that is how everyone got there and the reasons that they are there. That's the psychological aspect that becomes very interesting in it, because all of the characters are all there for the same reason. And seeing them adapt and carry on about their day as if, well, effectively nothing ever happened in the first place, that's when you start to see the small little conflicts and the strains start to build up within the backstories that go on. Now, there are 2 seasons. Season 2 is currently still going on. I'm only going to really focus on Season 1. I've watched all the current episodes of Season 2. But this is just going to be about Season 1, how things got going, and where I see certain prepper survival aspects within the storyline and how that could compare to a real-life situation. Now, first episode, you get small glimpses of the tension building up, and you hear about the possible event that's going on, and your mind is already racing through multiple type disasters. But based upon the conversation and then some of the scenes that you observe, you kind of know that it's a very widespread global thing that's occurring all at once. But as I said before, the primary thing that kicks it off is the actual death of the President of the United States. That's what starts everything. And then from that point, you sort of see things take off in their own separate lanes, traveling at different speeds, moving along the storyline as it goes through. Now, I did a video about the elite bunkers and private bunkers that the very wealthy are building that the government has, and this falls well within that range because it's something that wasn't started overnight. This was something that was planned years in advance and built up very quickly, very quietly. And it's the order of operations. It's almost like if you think about some of the heist movies like Ocean's 11. You know, you have one character saying, this is what I want to do, this is what I want to get done. And then small scenes, you see the recruitment process, you see the steps that are being taken in the background while publicly speaking, no one really knows what's going on. A whisper here, a whisper there, shaking of hands, signing of contracts, certain people come on board and things move along step by step by step. So as you start to watch these episodes, you get those little behind the scenes back shots of exactly how they got to the point that they're at. And it becomes almost like a heist, but instead of taking money, gold, things like that, you're basically taking the best or the most useful of the best into your little group, into your enclave, and you're making all the little concessions that you need to do to keep things more or less fairly under your control. Now, with something like that, with a vault system, a bunker system, an enclave, a completely closed in environment, you're going to have a certain amount of regulation to keep things running smoothly and operating smoothly. And with that, that also means that you have to have a level of control over everyone that's there. Effectively, everyone has to know where their lane is and they need to stay in it. But when you have individuals that either have their own agendas or they decide to skip out just a little bit, move out to a different lane, that's where the problems come down. And in a survival aspect of it, if you think about, well, if it's you by yourself or you with a small group of people, you know, there's not going to be any real issues, but it's always something small that starts off that way and then builds up bigger. What if it were a situation where you're part of a survival camp in one location and 3 miles away there's another survival camp and the two camps cross paths? It might be a hostile crossing, it might be a friendly crossing. You might exchange goods, you might exchange services trying to support each other, but at some point maybe one person in that other group decides that they want to go to your group, but then that leaves that other group short of manpower or short of critical needs, critical skills. Once people pull themselves out of the effective cog of the whole machine, the machine begins to break down. It may not stop immediately, but it begins to break down. And within this closed system, when people aren't doing what they're supposed to do, that causes problems. And then that's when you start to see the exertion of control going on. Now, in other videos, I've talked about the surveillance state and how we in the real world are progressing more and more towards that with both video tracking, biometrics, and everything else. In Paradise, every single guest or resident, as it were, is equipped with effectively a monitoring band. They all have it, and it controls all aspects of what they do. It's how they access everything from the kids that go to school. They open up their lockers, waving it in front of the door. You get access to buildings and things like that. No one really locks anything. Doors can be locked, but the level of security that's there on the visual aspect, they have a small police force that's more or less like safety patrol, if anything else. The real firepower comes from the protective services that are private security, and they're still meant to protect the upper echelon of the people that are there. And they're the ones that have access to all the fun bang bang toys of what you need to get that thing done. Within the system, though, there are cameras everywhere. There are biosensors, trackers, monitors. Everything is logged in by computers, and you have entire departments that do nothing but basically track the numbers, adjust the settings, the settings on the environment and everything else. Everything is monitored, everything is controlled, and everyone effectively is an open book because everyone got vetted, psychologically profiled, background checked, all that sort of stuff. And then from that, they were picked for whatever specialty they may have had. And if you're a person of no skill, but you're the spouse or dependent of someone who is, you're still cataloged and kind of boxed into a little framing of this is this type of person, this is their personality, and this is what we'll keep an eye on. Now, through the course of the first season, it still comes down to investigating who killed the president and then finding out the motives or the potential motives for multiple people, and you start to find out more of the inner workings, the backstory behind how everything got to be the way that it was, and things that transpired before the day happened, which is how they kind of refer to the big event, and then what went on immediately after. And effectively speaking, the series starts roughly 2 or 3 years after the day had occurred. So it's not a few days later, a few months later, it's about 3 years later. And that kind of brings in that sort of eerie sense to it when you watch everyone interact and you watch people going around just prior to the president being killed. You don't notice anything different. No one really seems to be out of place. And even the fact that he was murdered is not actually announced. He passed away. That's it. He died. So the public, as it is, doesn't understand that he was actually killed. They just think, tragedy, maybe it was his heart, maybe it was a stroke, who knows, whatever it is. And they go through the whole song and dance process of moving the narrative in that direction. So you have the leader who was effectively in charge, but he was kind of, casual and relaxed about it, because really he's not the president of the United States anymore. He's effectively the figurehead of a isolated, limited sized community. Now, a side note on that, I had mentioned before they had a small police force, which they were basically Barney Fife deputies. And realistically, yeah, if someone's getting drunk and disorderly, they probably have a little lockup that can put the person in, let them sober up, and that's it. But there is no outside world. So to a realistic extent, if you think about it, if you were a person, a resident within that, what are they going to do? There's not an actual prison that you can get sent off to, because there's not an actual court system with, real laws. Yes, they have authority, they have control, but what are they going to do? There's a limit to that control. And if it's one person, that's something. If it's 100 people, 1,000 people, they're not set up for that. So it's kind of like at a certain point when people start to realize that their level of safety and control is a very thin veneer. It's a facade, along with the reality that they're living in a facade. They're living in a fake town in America that's not actually real in comparison to what it projects itself to be. That's when the psychological aspect comes back into it. That's when the people that effectively covered and buried their own personal trauma of those events now start to see it come back up through the ground, start to sprout back up again. And people are going to start having to deal with that actual aspect of what is really going on and how are they now going to adapt to and adjust to all those events all over again. And as I had mentioned earlier, you see characters and some of them you'll make a quick assessment. It's like, oh, I don't trust that guy, or oh, I think they're up to something. And then when you see either their backstory or you see a flashback where it sort of fills in the blank that you weren't quite sure about, and then you start to understand them a little bit more. You may go, okay, now I understand this character more, still don't like them or still don't trust them, but now I understand why they are the way that they are. In other cases, you see that person in a completely different light, and now it makes you reassess, are they behaving the way that they do presently to pretend to be something else, or are they behaving the way that they are in the present moment to effectively lure someone out or lull someone into a certain level of complacency? And then if that's the case, for what purpose? What's the end goal? Because effectively everyone's caught in the elevator together. There's really no place to go. And even in the back rooms of paradise, it's all utilitarian. It's all necessary to keep the facade up. And you have people that work there that's their daily job, just like any place else. They get up, they go do their job, and they go home at the end of the day, all to keep up the appearance of a functioning normal society. And as things start to fall apart, things start to break down, and it becomes an unraveling very quickly, you start to see the primal nature almost immediately return to people. That fight or flight instinct that has been placated suddenly surges back to life, like a resuscitation of the heart. You get the paddles on there, and next thing you know, people realize that they are still actually in danger, and that danger is still a real part of the human condition within that environment. Now, with that, you see Sterling K. Brown's character, Xavier Collins, Agent Collins, go through the mental steps as the story progresses of doing things by the book, following the rules, to realizing that there's more to be investigated, and he's going to have to step outside that little safety chamber of what was effectively ingrained in him in his training, in his course as a Secret Service agent. He's now moving outside those lines, and he's getting a different view of things, not just with the information that he receives and he uncovers, but in the way that he responds to things. He changes his personality to effectively adapt to the new environment, which for most of the public, as it were, the other citizens, is still looking the same on the surface. And there'll be small little incidents here and there, but not enough to initially cause any major disturbance. It's only later on, when a few other events happen, that it's kind of the wake-up call to people, and that's what really jolts a lot of people's psyche, as it were. And then you see other coordinating flashbacks, especially of how the day occurred and how it happened and the reactions and responses to people. And it sort of solidifies where those characters were from the very beginning of the series. In the first episode, you kind of understand at that point, okay, now I know why this person is this way around these people, or this individual and this individual seem to have this dynamic going on that's a sort of a push-pull type of tension going on with them. You see all those events that led up to that point and the things that changed once everyone got inside the Paradise Enclave. So the primary focus with the season 1, you establish effectively what the day was, how the events had occurred after that, everything that led up to in the preparation of it. And I look at the series, at least right now for what I've even watched of season 2, is it is more of a psychological aspect first. It's more of a how the human condition changes and evolves. Even within a closed loop system, there's still different levels of evolution and de-evolution within those confines. And that's even more dynamic than simply a kinetic or a physical type of confrontation, where you can expect certain things in a war. You can expect certain things in some type of violent outbreak or violent confrontation. But when there is no violence on the surface, when everything is below the surface, below the water, below the waves, that's a totally different thing. Everything kind of builds up, moves about, and you can't really tell what's going on. You see the very, very small ripples on the water, but you're not seeing what's causing it underneath, and you don't know how big it's going to get, which to one extent is also part of what leads to the day. It's almost a parallel within the confines of the community. It mimics the global events that had occurred. Now, there are other things that go on, and again, this is not a guns and ammo explosion type of thing. There are no zombies, nothing like that. It is strictly humans interacting with humans, just like in real life. And you've got people that have their own agendas, that see their own pathways. You've got other people that look at a broad picture, but they may not necessarily see all the aspects, the small little details within that picture that make it unique. They just see one large tapestry and go, okay, this is what I'm looking at. You know, it's like if you go into a museum and you see one of those large medieval tapestries that's, 20 feet high and 15 feet wide, and you see the imagery of the tapestry. But it's only when you look closely, then you start to see the threads and the little pills and the little nubs and the fraying, and you see the thin spots there, and you start to realize that while it looks good on the surface at a distance, once you start getting close, you notice small things. But then if you get too close, you can only see that one imperfection. You can't see the rest of the imagery around it to take everything in. And that's realistically the way we are as humans. We may see a broad, wide area and make an assessment on that, and then we may notice something particular over there, something particular there, and we focus on that. We lose sight of everything else around and how things are changing, because while you're focused on one thing here, someone else is focused on something else over there, and the two of you may have the same idea, but you're going to be coming at it from different perspectives, different angles with different intentions. And that sometimes can also lead to conflict between people, whereas in the immediate action, it wasn't meant to be a confrontation. It just develops that way. And that's one of the things I really enjoyed about watching the first season. And then the second season, it's not really a spoiler, the second season does bring into more of a dynamic of, well, what about the rest of the world? And you start to get an idea of what had occurred after the day and how things evolved from that point. Like, as I said before, season 2 is still currently going on, so I have to wait until that's finished to get the entire, wrapping of it. But season 1, if you haven't watched it, I definitely say, go to Hulu, watch it. It's worth it. It's not a time intensive thing. The episodes go by pretty quick and they move along, and season 1 will be done. And then if you're still into it, season 2 is still unfolding as, I'm making this video right now. But that's it for now, and I'll catch you in the next one. One more thing. If you're new to this channel, just watching this video, at the end screens, I'm going to put up 2 videos that are in reference to not specifically the Paradise TV series, but I had mentioned them before. So check those 2 videos out if you haven't already. And I'll be posting up some new content coming up in the next week or so that evolves and revolves around the same general topic of, being prepared for those certain events and what you can do about that. Now, in this case, that's all I got for you. I'll catch you in the next one.